Jake Martinez woke up with his head pounding like someone had hit him with a hammer. The taste in his mouth was awful, like metal and medicine mixed together. He tried to move, but his arms felt heavy and slow. The drugs they gave him for the long trip were still making his body feel strange. He looked around and saw he was in a small metal box with one tiny window. Outside the window, space looked different than near Earth. The stars were wrong colors and there was a big red sun that looked sick and dying. In front of the sick sun was the biggest space station Jake had ever seen. It looked like someone had built a city out of metal and hate. The station had long arms reaching out in all directions. Each arm had rows and rows of tiny windows with bars. Jake knew those were cells. His cell, his new home for the rest of his life. A voice came from speakers in the wall. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Prisoner Transport 77 Alpha, you are cleared for Docking Bay 12. Prepare for immediate transfer. Jake felt the small ship bump and shake as it connected to the station. His door opened with a hiss. 3 guards walked in. They were not human. The first guard was tall and thin like a bird, but walked on 2 legs. Her feathers were dark blue and her eyes were bright yellow. She had 4 arms instead of 2. The second guard looked like a giant bug standing up. His skin was shiny black and he had big eyes that never blinked. The third guard was short and thick with green skin that looked wet all the time. "Get up, Deathworlder," said the bird-like guard. Her voice was sharp and mean. "Move slow. No sudden. Moves!" Jake stood up carefully. His legs were still shaky from the drugs. The guards put metal bands around his wrists and ankles. The bands hummed with electricity. Jake knew they would shock him if he tried to run or fight. They walked through long hallways inside the station. The walls were gray metal with no decorations. Everything smelled like disinfectant and fear. Other guards stopped what they were doing to stare at Jake as he walked past. Some of them whispered to each other in languages Jake did not understand. Through windows in the hallways, Jake could see into other sections of the prison. There were aliens of all different shapes and sizes locked behind energy barriers that glowed blue. Some looked like rocks with arms and legs. Others looked like plants that could walk. A few looked almost human, but with extra eyes or tentacles for hair. All of them watched Jake walk past with the same look in their eyes. Hunger, like they wanted to hurt him very badly. The guards brought Jake to a large room with a desk and many computer screens. Behind the desk sat the biggest alien Jake had seen yet. This one looked like a crocodile that learned to walk on 2 legs and wear clothes. His skin was covered in dark green scales, and he had yellow eyes with black slits down the middle. Scars covered his arms and face. This was someone who had been in many fights and won most of them. "I am Warden Zekthar," the crocodile alien said. His voice was deep and rough. "This is my prison. You will follow my rules or you will suffer." The bird guard handed the warden a small computer pad. "His file, sir. Jake Martinez, human, from the planet they call Earth. Class 15 Deathworld. Crime was destroying a hegemony trade ship during an unauthorized rescue mission." Warden Zekthar. Read the file slowly. His eyes got wider as he read. When he finished, he looked at Jake for a long time without saying anything. "Class 15, the warden said finally. "I have never had a Class 15 Deathworlder in my prison before. The stories they tell about your species," he shook his head. "They say humans are the most violent species in the galaxy. They say you kill for pleasure and never show mercy." Jake wanted to say that was not true. He wanted to explain that, He was just trying to save innocent people when he destroyed that trade ship. But he kept his mouth shut. These aliens had already decided what humans were like. Nothing he said would change their minds. "Captain Velnina," the warden said to the bird guard, "place this human in solitary confinement block 7. Maximum security protocols. I want guards watching him every minute of every day." Captain Velnina nodded with all 4 of her arms. "Yes, sir. What about exercise periods? None. What about social contact? None. This deathworlder stays locked up until he dies or until I say otherwise." They walked Jake through more hallways to a different part of the station. This section felt colder and darker. The walls were thicker here and there were more guards. Jake could hear screaming and crying coming from behind the walls. Some prisoners in this section had been alone so long they had gone crazy. Jake's cell was at the end of a long hallway. It was a metal cube about 10 feet on each side. There was a small bed built into the wall, a toilet, and a sink. That was all. No windows, no decorations, nothing to read or look at. The walls were smooth metal, with no cracks or holes. Captain Velnina opened the energy barrier that served as a door. "Get in," she ordered. Jake walked into the cell. The barrier closed behind him with a humming sound. He was trapped. Captain Velnina looked at him through the barrier. "You should know that most prisoners last about 3 days in solitary before they start begging to be moved. The record is 2 weeks before complete mental breakdown. Let us see how tough deathworlders really are." The guards walked away, leaving Jake alone in the metal box. Jake looked around his new home. It was supposed to break his spirit and make him go crazy. Instead, Jake smiled a little bit. He had been in worse places before. During his time in Earth's military, he had spent weeks alone in survival training. He knew how to keep his mind strong when his body was trapped. Jake sat down on the floor in the middle of the cell. He closed his eyes and started to breathe slowly and deeply. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about the people he had saved when he destroyed that trade ship. He thought about staying strong and staying human, no matter what this place tried to do to him. The guards watching through cameras expected to see him panic or cry or bang on the walls. Instead, they saw Jake Martinez sit quietly and calmly, like he was getting ready to meditate. This was not what they expected from a violent deathworld monster. This was something else entirely. 3 weeks passed since Jake Martinez arrived at the prison station. Dr. Kethmore sat in his medical office looking at numbers on his computer screen that made no sense. The green-skinned doctor had webbed fingers and big eyes that could see very well in the dark. He had been the prison doctor for 15 years and had seen thousands of prisoners come and go, but he had never seen anything like this human. Dr. Kethmore looked at Jake's medical readings again. Heart rate was steady and calm. Blood pressure was perfect. Brain scans showed no signs of stress or mental breakdown. In fact, all of Jake's health numbers were getting better every day, not worse. This was impossible. Solitary confinement was designed to destroy the mind. Most prisoners started showing problems after just a few days alone. By 2 weeks, they were usually crying and begging to be moved to general population. Some tried to hurt themselves just to get attention from the guards. But Jake Martinez was thriving. Dr. Kethmore called up the security videos on his computer. He wanted to see what the human was doing in his cell. What he saw made him very confused. Jake had turned his prison cell into some kind of training camp. Every morning when the lights came on, he would stand up and stretch his whole body in slow, controlled movements. Then he would do exercises. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and other movements that Dr. Kethmore did not recognize. After exercising, Jake would sit quietly with his eyes closed for about an hour. Dr. Kethmore knew this was something humans called meditation. It was supposed to calm the mind and reduce stress. Then Jake would use his food containers and small pieces of cloth to build things. He had made a calendar on the wall using scratches in the metal. He had created tools from plastic spoons and food trays. He even found a way to make the water from his sink flow in a pattern that helped him keep track of time. Most amazing of all, Jake had learned the schedule of the prison station perfectly. He woke up and went to sleep at exactly the same time, every day. He knew when the guards changed shifts, when meals were delivered, and when maintenance crews worked in the hallways outside his cell. Guard Yilseth was very curious about the strange human prisoner. She was young for a guard, and still learning her job. Her species looked like birds, but bigger and smarter than Earthbirds. She had joined the prison service because she wanted to help make the galaxy safer, but watching Jake made her think about what safety really meant. During her night shifts, Yilseth would walk past Jake's cell and look inside. Other prisoners in solitary were usually sleeping badly, talking to themselves, or staring at the walls with crazy eyes. Jake was different. One night, Yilseth saw Jake doing something that surprised her. He was looking at a small piece of cloth and moving his lips like he was talking to someone. But there was no one else in the cell. Yilseth thought maybe the human was finally going crazy like the others. Then she realized what Jake was actually doing. He was looking at a picture of his family and telling them about his day. He was keeping his connection to the people he loved, even though they were many light years away. Another night, Jake noticed Yilseth watching him through the energy barrier. Instead of getting angry or trying to hide what he was doing, Jake looked at her and smiled. He lifted his hand and waved at her like they were friends meeting on the street. Yilseth was so surprised she almost dropped her security pad. No prisoner had ever been friendly to her before. They usually cursed at guards or ignored them completely, but this human was treating her like a real person. The next night, when Yilseth walked past Jake's cell, he waved again. This time he also said, "Good evening," in the Galactic common language. His pronunciation was terrible, but he was trying to be polite. Yilseth found herself looking forward to her rounds past the human's cell. It was nice to have someone acknowledge her as more than just a uniform with a weapon. One day, Captain Velnina was doing a routine inspection of the solitary confinement cells. She had 4 arms and could work on multiple computer pads at the same time while walking. This made her very efficient at her job. When she reached Jake's cell, she stopped to look inside. What she saw made her very angry. The human had somehow damaged the walls of his cell. There were marks and scratches all over the metal surfaces. "Open the barrier," Captain Velnina ordered the guard with her. "I need to inspect the damage this deathworlder has caused." The energy barrier disappeared and Captain Velnina walked into Jake's cell. She expected to find a prisoner who had been trying to dig his way out or destroy prison property. Instead, Jake stood up politely and said, "Good morning, Captain. Is there something I can help you with?" Captain Velnina looked more closely at the marks on the walls. They were not random scratches made by someone trying to escape. They were carefully planned marks that served specific purposes. Jake had created a calendar, a water clock, and even a simple exercise schedule carved into the metal. "You have modified your cell without permission," Captain Velnina said. "This is against regulations." "I apologize," Jake said calmly. I was not trying to cause damage. I was just organizing my space to help me stay healthy and keep track of time. If you want me to stop, I will stop. Captain Velnina was confused. The human was not angry or defiant. He was not making excuses or trying to lie. He was simply explaining what he had done and offering to change his behavior if required. While I was checking the scratches, I noticed something else, Captain, Velnina said. The water flow from your sink sounds different than the other cells. What did you do? Jake looked a little embarrassed. I noticed that the pipes in this section have a vibration that suggests the water filtration system is not working at full efficiency. The resonance frequency indicates that the filtration matrix needs to be recalibrated. It is probably running about 12% below optimal performance. Captain Velnina stared at Jake for several seconds. Then she took out her communication device and called the maintenance department. This is Captain Velnina. I need a status report on the water filtration system for Block 7. Yes, I will wait. A few minutes later, her communication device buzzed with a response. Captain Velnina listened to the report with a growing expression of surprise on her face. How did you know about the filtration problem? She asked Jake. I used to be an engineer, Jake said simply. Before I became a soldier, I designed life support systems for space stations. The sound of water moving through pipes tells you a lot about how well the system is working. Captain Velnina left Jake's cell with her mind full of questions. She went straight to the maintenance department and checked their records. Sure enough, there had been a 12% efficiency loss in the water system for Block 7. The problem had been so gradual that the automatic systems had not detected it yet. The human prisoner had diagnosed a mechanical problem just by listening to water flow through the walls. That night, Captain Velnina read Jake's file more carefully. She learned that he had destroyed a hegemony trade ship, but only after the ship had refused to help rescue civilians from a disaster. Jake had saved over 300 lives and had voluntarily surrendered afterward. Maybe the stories about violent deathworlders were not completely true. Maybe this human was something different. Dr. Kethmore continued to monitor Jake's health and mental state. Every week, the human got stronger and calmer instead of weaker and crazier. It was like solitary confinement was actually good for him. Other prisoners in the block were starting to notice something strange, too. The human never screamed or cried like they did. Sometimes they could hear him humming songs or talking quietly to himself in a cheerful voice. Some of the other prisoners started trying to copy what the human was doing. They began exercising in their cells and trying to meditate like him. For the first time in the history of Block 7, the suicide rate dropped to 0. Warden Zekthar made his decision 3 days after the atmospheric emergency. Jake Martinez would be moved to general population in Block 4. It was still a high-security area, but prisoners could talk to each other and move around more freely. Jake packed his few possessions into a small bag. He had his pictures of family, some tools he had made from food containers, and the calendar he had scratched into a piece of metal. Everything he owned could fit in one hand. Captain Velnina escorted Jake to his new cell. As they walked through the corridors, other prisoners pressed against their energy barriers to get a look at the famous human. Some called out to him in different languages. Most of the words Jake could not understand, but the tone was curious rather than hostile. "Your new cellmate is Grok Tan," Captain Velnina told Jake. "He's serving 4 life sentences for violent crimes. His species is silicon-based, which means he's basically a living rock. He's bigger and stronger than you, and he doesn't like other prisoners." Jake nodded. "I understand. The guards expect you two to fight," Captain Velnina continued. "Grok Tan, has put 7 previous cellmates in the medical bay. 3 of them never recovered. I'll try not to give him a reason to hurt me, Jake said. Block 4 was noisier than solitary confinement. Jake could hear hundreds of conversations happening, in dozens of different languages. The air smelled like too many different species living close together. But it also smelled like life and activity, which was better than the sterile emptiness of his old cell. Jake's new cell was twice as big as his old one, with 2 beds and a small table. Sitting on one of the beds was the biggest creature Jake had ever seen up close. Groktan looked like someone had carved a person out of black granite and then made him 8 feet tall. His skin was rocky and rough, with veins of different colored minerals running through it. His eyes glowed like yellow crystals. When he breathed, it sounded like grinding stone. Groktan looked at Jake and spoke in a voice like an earthquake. "So you are the human who saved lives instead of taking them. I expected you to be bigger." "I'm probably smaller than most of your previous cellmates," Jake said calmly. "But I hope we can get along." Groktan laughed, which sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. "My previous cellmates all tried to prove they were tougher than me. They all learned they were wrong. What will you do, little human?" Jake looked around the cell and picked the bed that was farther from the door. "I'll try to be a good cellmate. If you need anything I can help with, just ask." This was clearly not the answer Groktan expected. He stared at Jake for a long moment. "You are not going to challenge me for the better bed?" "You were here first," Jake said. "It's your cell. I'm just sharing it." That evening, Jake shared his dinner with Groktan. The food dispensers gave each prisoner the same amount, but Jake noticed that Groktan's portions were much smaller relative to his body size. A creature that big needed more calories than the standard meal provided. "You don't have to give me your food," Groktan said, but he accepted it anyway. "We're cellmates," Jake said. "We should look out for each other." Over. The next few days, Jake noticed that Groktan had problems beyond just not getting enough food. The cell's lighting was wrong for his species. Silicon-based life forms needed specific light frequencies to stay healthy, but the standard prison lighting was designed for carbon-based species. Jake spent 2 days figuring out how to modify the light fixture using materials from the prison workshop. When he was done, the cell had lighting that worked for both humans and silicon-based life forms. Groktan's mineral pain, which had been bothering him for months, started to get better immediately. "Why are you helping me?" Groktan asked. "I am a violent criminal. I have killed many people. Everyone deserves to be healthy," Jake said simply. "Besides, if you feel better, you'll probably be easier to live with." Word spread quickly through Block 4 that the human was different from other prisoners. Instead of trying to claim territory or start fights, Jake was solving problems. A prisoner named Vextar had a communication device that was broken. It had not worked for 2 years, which meant he could not contact his family on his home planet. Jake fixed it in 20 minutes using spare parts from the maintenance shop. Another prisoner, Lockmere, had trouble with his meal dispenser. It gave him food that was toxic to his species. Jake reprogrammed it to provide safe alternatives. When prisoner Deknal's translator broke, Jake helped him learn enough galactic common language to communicate with guards and other prisoners. Jake never asked for payment or favors in return for his help. When prisoners offered to give him things, he politely declined. "Improving everyone's situation improves mine, too," he would say. This confused many of the other prisoners. In prison culture, everything was about trading favors and building power. But Jake seemed to help people just because he could. Guard Yilseth volunteered for extra shifts just so she could observe what was happening in Block 4. She had never seen anything like it. Prisoners who normally fought with each other were cooperating. The violence rate in the block dropped by 60% in just 2 weeks. "It's like he's creating a zone of calm around himself," Yilseth reported to Captain Velnina. Other prisoners don't want to fight near his cell because they might lose access to his help. Dr. Kethmore began doing informal psychological evaluations during Jake's routine medical checkups. The human talked about his family back on Earth, his regret about the incident that brought him to prison, and his hopes for the future. "I had to choose between following bad orders and saving innocent people," Jake explained during one session. "The trade ship captain was going to leave those civilians to die just because helping them would cost time and money. I couldn't let that happen." Dr. Kethmore checked the official records of Jake's case. By galactic legal standards, the human's actions could be considered heroic rather than criminal. He had violated military orders, but only to save lives. "Do you regret your choice?" Dr. Kethmore asked. "I regret that people got hurt," Jake said. "I regret that I'm stuck here instead of being with my family. But if I had to make the same choice again, I would still save those civilians." The doctor realized he was dealing with someone who had strong moral principles and stuck to them even when it cost him everything. One day, a fight broke out in the exercise yard between two groups of prisoners. These kinds of fights, usually, turned into riots that required guards to use force to stop them. But this time was different. Jake walked into the middle of the fight and started talking to both sides. He did not try to threaten anyone or take sides. Instead, he listened to what each group was angry about and helped them find a solution that satisfied everyone. The fight ended without anyone getting seriously hurt. The guards did not have to use their weapons. Both groups of prisoners went back to their normal activities. Captain Velnina watched the security recording of the incident 3 times. She had never seen a prisoner voluntarily stop a fight before. Usually, prisoners either joined fights or stayed away from them. They did not act as peacekeepers. "How did he do that?" she asked Dr. Kethmore. "He treated everyone like they were reasonable people with legitimate concerns," the doctor replied. "Most conflicts happen because people feel like no one is listening to them." Jake listened. That night, Groktan asked Jake a question that had been bothering him. "Why do you treat me like a friend? I am a killer. I have done terrible things." Jake thought about the question for a moment. "You did bad things in the past," he said, "but you're not doing bad things now. People can change if they want to. Maybe you're ready to be someone different." Groktan was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "No one has ever told me I could change before. Everyone just sees me as a monster. I see you as my cellmate who looks out for me and shares his food," Jake said. "Whatever you were before, that's who you are now." For the first time in 20 years, Groktan felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. The emergency alarm in the medical bay started screaming at 14:30 station time. Young guard Neil Khan had been helping transport a violent prisoner when the prisoner broke free and attacked. During the fight, Neil Khan was thrown against a metal wall and hit his head very hard. Dr. Kethmore rushed the unconscious guard into the emergency treatment room. Nilkan was bleeding inside his brain and needed immediate surgery. But when Dr. Kethmore tried to use the advanced bioscanner to see the exact location of the injury, the machine made angry beeping sounds and displayed error messages. "The bioscanner is malfunctioning," Dr. Kethmore told his medical assistant. "Without it, I cannot perform safe surgery. I need to see exactly where the bleeding is occurring." The medical assistant checked the maintenance schedule. The next repair technician is not scheduled to arrive for 6 days. This guard will be dead in 6 hours if I don't operate, Dr. Kethmore said. But if I operate without the scanner, I might cause more damage than I fix. Captain Velenina arrived in the medical bay to check on her injured guard. She saw Dr. Kethmore working frantically on the broken bioscanner with tools that were clearly not helping. "Doctor, what do you need?" Captain Velenina asked. "I need this machine to work," Dr. Kethmore said. "But I am a medical doctor, not an engineer. I know how to use this equipment, but I don't know how to fix it." Captain Velenina thought for a moment. "I know someone who might be able to help." 20 minutes later, Jake Martinez was escorted into the medical bay under heavy guard. He looked at the broken bioscanner and the unconscious guard on the treatment table. "What happened to the machine?" Jake asked. Dr. Kethmore explained the technical problems. The bioscanner used complex quantum resonance technology to create detailed images of internal injuries. Several components had failed at the same time, which suggested either very bad luck or a cascade failure caused by one broken part affecting all the others. Jake studied the machine carefully. He had never worked on this exact model before, but the basic principles were similar to medical equipment he had maintained on Earth military bases. "I think I can fix this," Jake said. "But I'll need some tools in about 2 hours." "We don't have 2 hours," Dr. Kethmore said. "The patient needs surgery soon or he will die." Jake looked at the injured guard and then at the broken machine. "Let me try a quick temporary fix first. If I can get it working at 50% efficiency, that might be enough for you to do the surgery. Then afterward, I can do a proper repair to bring it back to full function." Dr. Kethmore nodded. "Do it." Jake went to work on the bioscanner. The guards watched him carefully, but Jake was completely focused on the machine. His hands moved quickly and confidently as he rerouted circuits and bypassed damaged components. 30 minutes later, the bioscanner hummed back to life. The display screen showed a clear image of the injured guard's brain. "It's working," Dr. Kethmore said with relief. "I can see the bleeding. I can perform the surgery." While Dr. Kethmore operated on the injured guard, Jake continued working on the bioscanner. He replaced several worn parts with improved components from other medical devices. He also added safety features that would prevent the same type of cascade failure from happening again. When Dr. Kethmore finished the surgery, he found that the bioscanner was working better than it had in years. "This machine is now 40% more efficient than when it was new," Dr. Kethmore told Jake. "How did you improve it so much?" "The original design was pretty good," Jake said, "but it was built to be cheap rather than optimal. I just fixed some of the compromises the original engineers had to make." Guard Nilkan recovered completely from his surgery. When he woke up and learned that the human prisoner had saved his life by fixing the medical equipment, he asked to meet Jake personally, to thank him. "You saved my life," Nilkan said. "I will never forget that." "Dr. Kethmore saved your life," Jake replied. "I just fixed a machine." Word of Jake's latest heroic act spread through the station even faster than before. The guards began to see Jake as more than just a prisoner. He was becoming someone they could trust and rely on. Warden Zekthar made a decision that surprised everyone. He assigned Jake to work details in different parts of the station, always under guard, always helping solve problems, but with much more freedom than any prisoner had ever been given. Jake's first regular assignment was in the machine shop, helping maintain equipment that kept the station running. The chief engineer, Tekvar, was initially suspicious of having a prisoner in his department. "If you break anything, you go back to your cell and never come out," Tekvar warned. "I understand," Jake said. I'll be careful. Within a week, Jake had improved the efficiency of 17 different machines. He fixed problems that had been bothering the engineering staff for months. He also trained several junior engineers in repair techniques that were not taught in standard technical schools. This human knows more about machines than some of my senior staff, Tekvar reported to Captain Velnina. I want him assigned to my department permanently. Jake's next assignment was in the kitchen, helping with food distribution systems. The kitchen manager, Brett Null, had been struggling with equipment that broke down constantly and wasted large amounts of food. Jake redesigned the food distribution network to be more reliable and more efficient. He also created a system that could provide specialized meals for prisoners with unusual dietary needs without slowing down service for everyone else. Food waste is down 30%, Brett Null reported, and prisoners are complaining less about meal quality. This human is a genius. Jake also spent time in the station library, helping prisoners access educational materials. Many prisoners could not read Galactic Standard Language very well, and the library computers were complicated to use. Jake created simple interface programs that made the computers easier to use. He also started informal tutoring sessions, helping prisoners learn to read and write in multiple languages. Captain Velnina found herself having real conversations with Jake during his work assignments. Unlike other prisoners who saw guards as enemies to be avoided or manipulated, Jake treated her like a colleague. "How is your family doing?" Jake asked one day while they walked to his assignment in the communications center. Captain Velnina was surprised by the question. "Why do you ask?" "You mentioned before that you send money home to help your siblings go to school," Jake said. "I was just wondering how their studies are going." No prisoner had ever asked Captain Velnina about her personal life before. It felt strange but also nice to have someone care about her as a person rather than just as a guard. "My youngest sister just graduated from Flight Academy," Captain Velnina said. "She wants to be a pilot like our father was." "That's wonderful," Jake said. "You must be very proud of her." Over the following weeks, Jake quietly made improvements to several station systems that resulted in efficiency bonuses for the staff. When these bonuses were distributed, Captain Velnina realized that Jake had deliberately created opportunities for the guards to earn extra money. "Why did you do this?" she asked him. "Everyone deserves a chance to improve their situation," Jake said. "You work hard to keep this station running safely. You should be rewarded for doing a good job." Captain Velnina thought about her sister's flight school tuition, which was now easier to afford because of the efficiency bonuses. A prisoner had helped her family achieve their dreams. Dr. Kethmore continued monitoring Jake's psychological profile and also started studying the effects Jake was having on other people. The data showed remarkable improvements across multiple categories. Guard stress levels were down. Prisoner violence was at an all-time low. Even the suicide rate among prisoners had dropped to nearly zero. It's like he's creating ripples of positive change everywhere he goes, Dr. Kethmore noted in his report. Guards are happier because their work is easier and more meaningful. Prisoners are calmer because they feel like someone cares about their well-being. The most surprising change was in the guards themselves. They began requesting assignments that involved supervising Jake's work details. They wanted to be around him because he made their jobs more interesting and less stressful. Guard Yilseth summed up what many of her colleagues were feeling. "He makes me remember why I wanted to be a guard in the first place. I wanted to help make the galaxy safer. He shows me that safety comes from helping people, not just controlling them." The trouble started in Block 2 during the morning prisoner search. Guard Kepton was new to the prison and had not yet learned about the different cultural practices of the various alien species. When he searched prisoner Zalthus, he accidentally touched a religious symbol that was sacred to Zalthus's people. In Zalthus's culture, allowing an outsider to touch this symbol was considered the worst possible insult. It meant that Zalthus was no longer worthy to return to his home planet or see his family again. Zalthus screamed in rage and grief. Other prisoners from his species heard the scream and understood what had happened. Within minutes, the situation exploded into violence. 43 prisoners in Block 2 began fighting the guards. They took 3 guards hostage, including young guard Captain, who had caused the original problem. The prisoners barricaded themselves in the recreational area and demanded that the guards leave their block entirely. Captain Velnina responded with standard riot suppression protocols. Security teams surrounded Block 2 with riot shields and stun weapons. The entrances were sealed, and the ventilation system was prepared to flood the area with sedative gas. But there was a serious problem with using the gas. 7 prisoners in Block 2 had respiratory systems that could not handle sedatives. The gas that would calm down the rioters would kill the prisoners who could not breathe it. Warden Zekthar arrived at the command center and studied the situation reports. 3 guards were trapped with increasingly angry prisoners. Standard suppression methods would result in deaths. Non-standard methods might allow the riot to spread to other blocks. How long until our riot specialists arrive from the main headquarters? The warden asked. 18 hours minimum, Captain Velnina replied. The prisoners will not wait that long. They are demanding immediate action to address their grievances. Dr. Kethmore reviewed the psychological profiles of the rioters. They are not trying to escape, he reported. This is about dignity and respect. They feel humiliated and want acknowledgement that they have been wronged. Warden Zekthar considered his options. All of them were bad. Then Captain Velnina made a suggestion that surprised everyone. Sir, I recommend we ask Jake Martinez to try mediating the situation, she said. Absolutely not, Warden Zekthar replied immediately. Using a prisoner as a negotiator is completely against regulations. It would be considered a sign of weakness by the Galactic Prison Authority. With respect, sir, Jake has successfully mediated conflicts before, Captain Velnina said. The prisoners trust him. The guards trust him. He might be able to find a solution that does not require violence. If we send him in there and the rioters kill him, we will be responsible for his death, the warden said. If we use gas and kill 7 prisoners, we will be responsible for their deaths too, Captain Velnina replied. For 20 minutes, the situation got worse. The rioters became more agitated. The hostages were being threatened. Time was running out. Finally, Warden Zekthar made a desperate decision. Bring me the human! Jake was escorted to the command center under heavy guard. Through the security monitors, he could see the riot happening in Block 2. Prisoners were shouting and breaking furniture. The 3 guard hostages were tied up in the corner looking terrified. I need someone to go into that block and talk the rioters into surrendering. Peacefully, Warden Zekthar said. Captain Velnina thinks you might be able to help. Jake studied the monitor screens carefully. What started this riot? Dr. Kethmore explained about the cultural insult and the religious significance of what had happened. Jake nodded as he listened. So, this is not really about the guards or the prison, Jake said. This is about a man who believes his honor and his connection to his family have been destroyed. Correct, Dr. Kethmore said. Zalthus feels that he can never go home again because he has been spiritually contaminated. Jake thought for a moment. Let me try to talk to them, but I need to go in alone, without guards. If they see armed guards, They will think this is a trick. That is impossible, Warden Zekthar said. I cannot send you in there without protection. The protection is that they know me, Jake said. I have helped many prisoners from Block 2 with various problems. They have no reason to hurt me. Captain Velnina looked at the monitors. The situation was getting worse every minute. Sir, we need to try something different. Warden Zekthar made the hardest decision of his career. Very well. But you carry a communication device so we can monitor the situation. If anything goes wrong, we extract you immediately. Jake walked into Block 2 carrying only a small translation device. The first thing he noticed was the smell of fear and anger mixed together. The second thing he noticed was how quiet it became when the rioters saw him. I am here to listen, Jake announced to the room. I want to understand what happened and see if we can fix it. The leader of the rioters, Prisoner Melkoth, approached Jake cautiously. Why did they send you, human? Are you here to trick us into surrendering? I am here because I want to help, Jake said simply. I know that something very serious happened to Zalthis. I want to understand what it means and see if there is a way to make it right. Jake spent the next 4 hours listening. He sat with Zalthis and learned about his culture and his religion. He talked to other prisoners about their experiences with guards who did not understand their needs. He listened to complaints about food, medical care, and visitation policies. Most importantly, Jake did not try to defend the guards or the prison system. He just listened and acknowledged that the prisoners had legitimate reasons to be upset. The guard who touched your symbol did not mean to insult you, Jake told Zalthis. But that does not change the fact that you have been hurt. Your pain is real, and your anger is justified. You understand, Zalthis said with surprise. The other guards always tell us that our cultural practices are foolish superstitions. You accept that they are important to us. They are important because they are important to you, Jake said. I do not have to share your beliefs to respect them. Jake proposed a solution that addressed the prisoners' concerns while also meeting the prison's security needs. Guard Captain would receive cultural sensitivity training and would offer a formal apology to Zalthis, according to the proper customs. The prison would implement new procedures to prevent similar cultural misunderstandings in the future. Most importantly, Jake arranged for a religious leader from Zalthis' homeworld to perform a spiritual cleansing ceremony via video communication. This would restore Zalthis' honor and allow him to maintain his connection to his family. This ceremony will take place within 3 days, Jake promised. The warden has agreed to authorize the special communication link. The rioters looked at each other. This was more than they had expected. They had demanded respect, and instead, they were being offered understanding and accommodation. Why should we trust these promises? Melkoth asked. Because I am making them, Jake said, and you know that I keep my word. One by one, the rioters agreed to end the violence. They released the 3 guard hostages unharmed. They allowed security teams to enter Block 2 peacefully. As Jake walked out of the riot area, prisoner Zalthis called after him. Thank you for seeing us as people worthy of respect. You are people, Jake said. That should not be unusual. Commissioner Dalvex arrived at the station 12 hours after the riot ended. He had come to investigate what was expected to be a massive failure of prison security. Instead, he found a situation that had been resolved without a single injury or death. How did this happen? Commissioner Dalvex asked Warden Zekthar. A prisoner mediated the conflict, the warden admitted reluctantly. Commissioner Dalvex stared at the warden for a long moment. A prisoner? That is highly irregular. It was also highly effective, Captain Velnina said. Jake Martinez prevented what could have been a massacre. Commissioner Dalvex reviewed the security recordings and incident reports. He interviewed the guards who had been taken hostage. He talked to the prisoners who had participated in the riot. Everyone told him the same story. The human prisoner had listened to their concerns, treated them with dignity, and found solutions that satisfied everyone involved. "This is unprecedented," Commissioner Dalvex said. "I need to study this situation more carefully." 6 months had passed since Jake Martinez first arrived at the prison station as a supposedly dangerous Deathworld criminal. Commissioner Dalvex returned to the station with a team of investigators to study what the reports were calling the impossible transformation of a maximum security facility. What Commissioner Dalvex found defied everything he thought he knew about prison management. The statistics were remarkable. Violence between prisoners had dropped by 80%. Guard. Injuries were down 70%. The number of prisoners attempting suicide had fallen to 0. Most surprising of all, the recidivism rate for prisoners released from the station had dropped to only 15% compared to the galactic average of 63%. Commissioner Dalvex walked through the corridors with Warden Zekthar, observing the daily operations of the prison. What he saw was completely different from any correctional facility he had visited before. In the workshops, prisoners and guards worked together on maintenance projects. Instead of the usual tension and suspicion, there was an atmosphere of cooperation and shared purpose. Prisoners offered suggestions for improving equipment, and guards listened to their ideas. In the recreational areas, different species of prisoners sat together peacefully, sharing meals and playing games. Cultural conflicts that would normally lead to fights were being resolved through discussion and compromise. In the medical bay, prisoners volunteered to help Dr. Kethmore with routine tasks. They organized medical supplies, assisted with translations for patients who spoke unusual languages, and even helped maintain the sophisticated equipment that Jake had improved. How did this happen? Commissioner Dalvex asked Warden Zekthar. Jake. Martinez introduced something called problem-solving circles, the warden explained. Groups where prisoners and guards work together to identify issues and find solutions. Commissioner Dalvex observed one of these problem-solving circles in session. 15 prisoners from different species sat in a circle with 5 guards. They were discussing the food distribution system and how to accommodate the dietary needs of a new prisoner whose species required meals prepared at very high temperatures. Jake facilitated the discussion, but he did not dominate it. He asked questions that helped people think through the challenges and encouraged everyone to contribute ideas. When disagreements arose, he helped the group find common ground. The key insight, Jake explained to the group, is that we all want the same basic things: safety, health, dignity, and hope for the future. When we focus on these shared goals, the specific problems become easier to solve. A guard named Torvak suggested modifying one of the kitchen's heating units. A prisoner named Yildart offered to help with the technical work, since his species had experience with high-temperature cooking. Another prisoner, Kenlar, volunteered to test the new food preparation method to make sure it was safe. Within 30 minutes, the group had developed a complete plan that satisfied everyone's concerns. No one argued. No one tried to dominate the discussion. Everyone contributed something useful. Commissioner Dalvex had never seen anything like it. The human does not just fix machines, Captain Velnina explained to the commissioner. He fixes relationships. He helps people understand that they have more in common than they think. Dr. Kethmore presented Commissioner Dalvex with detailed psychological studies of the prison population. The data showed dramatic improvements in mental health across all demographic groups. Anxiety and depression rates among both prisoners and guards have decreased significantly, Dr. Kethmore reported. Stress-related medical problems are down 40%. Even sleep quality has improved throughout the station. How do you explain these changes? Commissioner Dalvex asked. Jake Martinez changed the fundamental culture of this institution, Dr. Kethmore said. Before he arrived, this was a place where people were warehoused and forgotten. Now it is a place where people are valued and given opportunities to grow. Commissioner Dalvex interviewed dozens of prisoners and guards individually. Their stories were remarkably consistent. Prisoner Grokton, who had previously been considered one of the most dangerous inmates, spoke about how Jake had helped him learn to control his anger. The human taught me that I could choose who I wanted to be, Grokton said. I spent so many years being angry and violent because I thought that was all I was capable of, but Jake showed me that I could be someone who helps instead of hurts. Guard Yilseth described how her job satisfaction had improved dramatically. I used to dread coming to work, she said. Every day was about preventing violence and maintaining control. Now my job is about helping people solve problems and improve their lives. It feels meaningful instead of just necessary. Commissioner, Dalvex spoke with Jake directly for several hours. He found the human to be thoughtful, articulate, and genuinely committed to helping others. What is your secret? Commissioner Dalvex asked. How did you accomplish something that prison reform experts have been trying to achieve for centuries? Jake considered the question carefully. I do not think I did anything special, he said. I just treated everyone like they were people worth caring about. Prisoners, guards, administrators. We are all individuals dealing with difficult circumstances. When you approach people with respect and genuine interest in their well-being, they usually respond positively. But these are hardened criminals, Commissioner Dalvex said. Many of them have committed terrible crimes. Some of them have done terrible things, Jake agreed. But that does not mean they are terrible people incapable of change. Everyone has the potential to grow and become better than they were. The question is whether we give them opportunities to do that, or whether we just lock them away and forget about them. Commissioner Dalvex reviewed case studies of individual prisoners who had been transformed by their experiences in the reformed prison system. Prisoner Vexnalo had been convicted of fraud and embezzlement. Before Jake's arrival, Vexnalo had been bitter and uncooperative. Now he was leading financial literacy classes for other prisoners and helping them understand how to manage money legally when they were released. Prisoner Dolomaya had been serving time for violent assault. She was now working in the medical bay and had shown such skill in patient care that Dr. Kethmore was recommending her for formal medical training. Even prisoners who were serving life sentences and would never be released had found purpose and meaning in their lives. They tutored younger prisoners, maintained the station's systems, and contributed to the community in positive ways. The traditional approach to incarceration assumes that punishment and isolation will discourage future criminal behavior, Jake explained to Commissioner Dalvex. But punishment without hope just creates despair, and despair often leads to more violence. If you give people meaningful work, social connections, and opportunities to help others, they discover better versions of themselves. Captain Velnina, who had been promoted to deputy warden, gave Commissioner Dalvex a tour of the guard facilities. The changes were evident there, too. Guard retention is at an all-time high, she reported. We used to lose 30% of our staff every year because the work was so stressful and demoralizing. Now guards are requesting to stay longer because they find their work fulfilling. The guards are also healthier and happier, Dr. Kethmore added. Stress-related illnesses among staff have decreased by 50%. Absenteeism is down, productivity is up. Commissioner Dalvex spent a week at the station observing daily operations. He saw prisoners teaching each other job skills. He saw guards and prisoners collaborating on improvement projects. He saw conflicts being resolved through dialogue instead of force. Most importantly, he saw hope. In a place that had once been filled with despair and violence, people now believed that tomorrow could be better than today. This station has become a model for what correctional facilities could be, Commissioner Dalvex wrote in his report. It demonstrates that rehabilitation and redemption are possible, even in the most challenging circumstances. The transformation was so complete that other prison administrators began requesting permission to visit the station and study its methods. Word spread throughout the Galactic Correctional System about the facility where a human prisoner had revolutionized the entire approach to justice and rehabilitation. But the most important transformation was not in the systems or the statistics. It was in the individual lives that had been changed. People who had once been enemies now considered each other friends. Individuals who had lost hope had found new purpose. A community had been built in a place where community should have been impossible. And at the center of it all was Jake Martinez, a human who had refused to let circumstances define his character and had shown others that they could make the same choice. The alarm siren started screaming at Euro 347 station time. Jake woke up immediately in his cell, his military training making him alert and ready for danger. Red lights flashed in the hallways outside his cell, and he could hear guards running. Past his door, over the communication system, a voice was repeating the same message in multiple languages. Atmospheric emergency in Section C. All personnel evacuate Section C immediately. This is not a drill. Jake stood up and listened carefully. He could hear the sounds that other people might miss. The air circulation fans were running too fast. The ventilation system was making a grinding noise that meant something was broken. And underneath all the mechanical sounds, Jake could hear something that made his blood turn cold. People were coughing and choking. Through his cell's energy barrier, Jake could see guards running past wearing emergency breathing masks. Their movements were rushed and panicked. This was a bad situation, getting worse very quickly. Guard Yilseth stopped near Jake's cell to check her equipment. Her breathing mask was fogged up and she was having trouble reading her scanner. "What's happening?" Jake called out to her. Yilseth looked at him through the barrier. Even with her mask on, Jake could see she was scared. "Toxic gas leak in Section C. The atmospheric processors failed and poisonous chemicals are getting into the air supply. 300 prisoners and 50 guards are trapped in there." "How long until you can fix it?" Jake asked. "The engineering crew says 6 hours minimum," Yilseth said. "But people will start dying in 2 hours, maybe less. The automated repair systems are not working." Jake felt his heart speed up, but not from fear, from the need to help. "I can fix that leak," he said. "I built similar systems on Earth. Atmospheric processors use the same basic principles everywhere." Yilseth stared at him. "You're a prisoner. We can't let you out of your cell." "People are dying," Jake said simply. "I can help them. I know how these systems work." Yilseth looked down the hallway where guards were still running back and forth in panic. Then she looked back at Jake. "I have to ask my captain." She ran off, leaving Jake alone with the sound of alarms and the knowledge that people were slowly suffocating while he sat in a metal box. 10 minutes later, Captain Velnina arrived at Jake's cell with a full security team. All 4 of her arms were carrying different weapons or tools. Her face showed the stress of a commander dealing with a crisis that was getting out of control. "Guard Yilseth says you claim you can repair our atmospheric system," Captain Velnina said. "I can try," Jake said, "but I need to see the damage first, and I'll need some basic tools." Captain Velnina was quiet for a moment. Jake could see she was thinking hard about the risks. Letting a prisoner out of his cell was against every rule in the book. But people were dying. "If you try anything, if you try to escape or hurt anyone, my guards will kill you instantly," Captain Velnina said. "I understand," Jake said. "I just want to help." The energy barrier disappeared. Jake walked out of his cell for the first time in 3 weeks. 4 guards surrounded him with weapons ready. They put restraints on his arms that would paralyze him if he made any sudden moves. They ran through the hallways toward Section C. Jake could smell the toxic gas even through the emergency filters. It was sharp and chemical, like bleach mixed with acid. People without breathing masks would be in serious trouble. When they reached the damaged area, Jake could see the problem immediately. A main atmospheric processor had failed, but not in a normal way. This was sabotage or a very bad accident. Pipes were twisted and broken. Chemical tanks were leaking. The computer systems were fried. The engineering crew was standing around looking hopeless. Their leader, a tall alien with tentacles for arms, saw Jake and got angry. "Why did you bring a prisoner here?" the engineer demanded. "This is a restricted area." "He says he can fix it," Captain Velnina said. The engineer laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This system is too complex for someone without advanced technical training. Even our best engineers need 6 hours minimum." Jake looked at the damaged equipment. He could see what had happened and what needed to be done. "The main problem is that you're trying to fix everything at once," he said. "You don't need to fix everything. You just need to stop the poison gas and get clean air flowing again." Jake pointed to different parts of the system. "Bypass these 3 pipes. Reroute the airflow through the secondary processors. Use emergency power to boost the filtration in sectors 4 and 7. It won't be perfect, but it will keep people alive until you can do proper repairs." The engineer looked where Jake was pointing. Slowly, his expression changed from anger to surprise to hope. That might actually work," the engineer said. "It's not standard procedure, but it could work." "Then let's do it," Jake said. For the next 2 hours, Jake worked alongside the engineering crew. His hands were still in restraints, so he could not hold tools, but he could direct the work and solve problems as they came up. When one solution did not work, he quickly thought of another approach. The guards watched him carefully, but Jake never made any move to escape or cause trouble. He was completely focused on saving lives. When clean air finally started flowing into Section C again, a cheer went up from the rescue teams. The poisonous gas was gone. People were safe. Captain Velnina checked her communication device. "Medical teams report no deaths. 17 people needed treatment for gas exposure, but everyone will recover." Jake felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "I'm glad we could help them." The engineer who had doubted Jake came over to shake his hand, forgetting that Jake was supposed to be a dangerous prisoner. "Your solution was brilliant," the engineer said. "Simple, effective, and fast. Our computer models never suggested that approach." "Sometimes the old ways work better than the fancy new ways," Jake said. As they walked back toward the prison section, Guard Yilseth asked Jake a question that had been bothering her. "Why did you help us? You could have stayed quiet and let us figure it out ourselves." Instead, you risked your life to save people who are keeping you locked up. Jake thought about her question for a moment. We're all stuck on this station together, he said finally. Guards, prisoners, everyone. If the station fails, we all die together too. It doesn't make sense to let people suffer when I can help. Prevent it. When they reached Jake's cell, he walked back inside without being ordered. The energy barrier closed behind him again. He was back in his metal box, but something had changed. Word of what Jake had done spread through the prison very quickly. Prisoners talked to each other during meal times and exercise periods. Guards talked to each other during shift changes. By the end of the day, everyone on the station knew the same story. The human deathworlder had saved lives instead of taking them. Dr. Kethmore got reports from medical teams who had treated the guards with gas exposure. Several guards mentioned the same thing in their statements. The human had stayed calm under pressure. He had worked to help others instead of trying to escape. He had treated everyone with respect and politeness. He just said we're all stuck on this station together, one guard reported, like we were all on the same team. That night, Warden Zekthar sat in his office reading reports about the atmospheric emergency. The crisis was over, but now he had a new problem. Protocol demanded that Jake go back to solitary confinement, but word about his heroic actions had already spread to the general prison population. Some prisoners were calling the human a hero. Others wanted to meet him and talk to him. A few guards had even suggested that Jake should get a reward for saving lives. Warden Zekthar had been running prisons for 30 years. He had never faced a situation like this before. What do you do with a prisoner who saves the lives of his captors? Commissioner Dalvex faced a problem that no prison administrator had ever encountered before. Jake Martinez was serving a life sentence for destroying a hegemony trade vessel, but keeping him imprisoned was starting to seem counterproductive to the goals of the justice system. The human had proven that his methods could transform not just one prison, but potentially the entire galactic correctional system. Several other facilities had already requested that Jake be transferred to help them implement similar reforms. The Galactic Prison Authority was under pressure to spread his innovations to institutions throughout known space. But there was a political problem. Jake's original sentence had been intended as a strong message to the expanding human colonies that the hegemony would not tolerate interference with galactic trade. Reducing his sentence now might be seen as weakness or favoritism toward his species. Commissioner Dalvex spent many hours reviewing Jake's case files and the legal precedents that might apply. What he discovered surprised him. Jake's original crime had been destroying a trade vessel that refused to assist in a civilian rescue operation. The trade captain had ignored distress calls from a damaged passenger ship because stopping to help would have cost time and money. Jake had disabled the trade vessel's engines and used his military transport to rescue over 300 civilians who would otherwise have died. Under current galactic law, failure to provide assistance to civilian ships in distress was itself a serious crime. The trade captain should have been prosecuted for criminal negligence. Instead, Jake had been convicted for forcing the captain to comply with laws that already existed. Commissioner Dalvex brought his findings to a review board that included representatives from multiple species and political factions. The hearing took place via video conference with participants calling in from across the galaxy. The evidence suggests that Jake Martinez was convicted for enforcing existing humanitarian law rather than violating it, Commissioner Dalvex testified. His actions saved lives and prevented a crime, but he was punished because his methods were unconventional. The review board studied the case for several weeks. They interviewed survivors of the civilian ship that Jake had rescued. They examined the trade vessel's logs, which showed that the captain had deliberately ignored multiple distress calls. They reviewed the legal procedures that should have been followed. Their conclusion was unanimous. Jake Martinez had been unjustly convicted. But the review board faced the same political problem as Commissioner Dalvex. Simply releasing Jake might create diplomatic tensions with species that opposed human expansion. A more creative solution was needed. The answer came from an unexpected source. Warden Zekthar formally petitioned the Galactic Prison Authority to commute Jake's sentence to community service. Instead of being imprisoned, Jake would work as a consultant helping to reform correctional facilities throughout the galaxy. This human has demonstrated skills that could benefit millions of prisoners and guards, Warden Zekthar wrote in his petition. Keeping him locked up wastes his potential and deprives society of valuable reforms that could reduce crime and improve public safety. The petition was supported by testimony from dozens of guards and prisoners who had been positively affected by Jake's work. Even former enemies spoke on his behalf. Prisoner Melkoth, who had led the riot in Block 2, submitted a statement saying, "Jake Martinez showed us that change is possible. He proved that people labeled as criminals can become contributing members of society. His continued imprisonment serves no useful purpose." Captain Velnina testified about the improvements in guard safety and job satisfaction. "Jake has made our work safer and more meaningful," she said. "He has probably prevented more crimes through his rehabilitation programs than traditional punishment methods ever could." Dr. Kethamore presented research data showing that Jake's methods were far more effective than conventional approaches. "Recidivism rates at our facility are now the lowest in the galaxy," he reported. "These results could be replicated at other institutions if Jake is allowed to share his expertise." The political breakthrough came when representatives from several neutral species offered to sponsor Jake's community service program. They proposed creating an independent commission that would oversee his work and ensure that his reforms were applied fairly across all species and political affiliations. After 6 months of legal proceedings, the Galactic Prison Authority announced its decision. Jake Martinez would be released from custody and assigned to the newly created Commission for Correctional Reform. His sentence would be commuted to 20 years of community service, helping to improve prison conditions throughout known space. The day of Jake's release was unlike any prison departure in galactic history. Instead of sneaking him out quietly to avoid attention, the station held a formal ceremony attended by prisoners, guards, and administrators. Groktan spoke on behalf of the general prison population. The massive rock-like alien's voice was filled with emotion as he addressed the crowd. "Jake Martinez came to us as a prisoner, but he became our teacher and our friend," Groktan said. "He showed us that we were more than our worst mistakes. He proved that redemption is possible for anyone willing to work for it. We will miss him, but we will continue the work he started here." Guard Yilseth represented the security staff. "Jake taught us that true security comes from helping people become their best selves, not from controlling their worst impulses," she said. "He made us better guards and better people." Dr. Kethmore presented Jake with a datapad containing detailed studies of the prison's transformation. "Your methods have been proven scientifically sound," the doctor said. "This research will help you implement similar changes wherever you go next." Captain Velnina, now promoted to warden of the facility, gave Jake a special gift: a communication device that would allow him to stay in contact with the friends he had made at the station. "You will always have a place here," she said. "This station will continue to operate according to the principles you taught us. You created something that will outlast your time here. Warden Zekthar, the old reptilian administrator who had initially seen Jake as a dangerous threat, delivered the final speech. When Jake Martinez first arrived, I expected him to be a source of violence and disruption, Zekthar said. Instead, he became the catalyst for the most positive transformation in this facility's history. He proved that wisdom and compassion can be found in the most unexpected places. As Jake prepared to board the transport that would take him to his first assignment with the Reform Commission, he reflected on his time at the station. He had arrived as a prisoner facing a hopeless future. He was leaving as a free man with a mission to help improve conditions for prisoners and guards throughout the galaxy. The experience had changed him as much as he had changed the prison. He had learned that friendship and community could exist anywhere, even in the darkest circumstances. He had discovered that small acts of kindness and respect could have enormous consequences. Most importantly, he had proven to himself and others that every person, regardless of their past mistakes, had the potential to contribute something positive to the world. Jake's final act before leaving was to visit his old cell in Block 4. Groktan was there, along with several other prisoners who had become his friends. They sat together quietly for a few minutes, not needing to say much. "What will you miss most about this place?" Groktan asked. Jake smiled as he looked around, at the faces of people who had started as strangers and become family. "The people," he said. "You all taught me that hope and friendship can grow anywhere, even in a maximum security prison." "You taught us the same thing," Groktan replied. As Jake's transport departed the station, he could see through the viewport that many prisoners and guards had gathered at the windows to wave goodbye. The facility that had once been known as the worst prison in the galaxy was now a beacon of hope and reform. Dr. Kethmore updated Jake's official file one final time. Under the section marked Classification, he typed, "Jake Martinez, human, status, proof that even in the most challenging circumstances, dignity, compassion, and friendship can transform lives and institutions." The transport carried Jake toward his new assignment, where other prisons waited to be transformed. Behind him, the station continued its work according to the principles he had helped establish. The reforms he had started would spread throughout the galaxy, changing the lives of millions of prisoners and guards. But the most important change was not in policies or procedures. It was in the understanding that every person, regardless of their circumstances, deserved to be treated with dignity and given opportunities to grow. Jake Martinez had come to prison as a convicted criminal and was leaving as living proof that redemption and friendship were possible for anyone willing to work for them. The galaxy would never be the same.